Chapter 9. Encounter with Wolves. Ebony was the first to spot the puppy at the foot of the hill. The big black wolf stared at the little dog. There was no welcome in the wolf's eyes. Granite shrank under the steady gaze. The wolf looked over his shoulder, then settled back on his haunches to wait. Granite did not move. Pebbles rattled. Then Climber, a smaller wolf, whose light coat was streaked with black, appeared at the rocky crest. Granite found him less frightening than the first wolf, perhaps because the black fur encircling his eyes made him look almost like a husky. This young wolf sat beside Ebony and contemplated the lonely little dog. Neither made a sound. Granite didn't know whether they intended to help him or eat him. He tried to look harmless. A third wolf emerged, then a fourth, and a fifth. They formed a line across the ridge. Soon, a sixth wolf appeared. It was Snowdrift. She had a thick ruff around her face, but she was thin and haggard. Her skin hung loosely on her frame, and she moved slowly, almost sadly. She stared at the ground, but nothing caught her interest. With an abrupt motion, the white wolf raised her head. She breathed deeply. Her ears pricked forward. Straining to see in the dusk, she peered down the slope. At last she made out the small form at the foot of the hill. Her yellow eyes, which had been dull, shone with interest. The white wolf bounded swiftly down the dark hillside, skirting boulders and leaping over gullies. In an instant she was at Granite's side, sniffing him over from muzzle to tail. The puppy trembled with fear and pain. The white wolf nosed Granite's injured leg, testing the paw and the foreleg. When she shoved at the sore place, he yelped. She licked away the blood that trickled from a deep cut, then looked up at the silent wolves silhouetted against the night sky. Stretching her neck, she barked softly. The white wolf trotted back up the hill, her head held high, her tail hanging easily in a loose curve. Granite was helpless. He waited, wondering what would happen to him. Snowdrift licked Ebony's muzzle, wagging her tail sideways. He averted his head, never taking an eye off the little dog. She grabbed his muzzle gently between her teeth, then dropped it. They exchanged a long glance, then Ebony stood up. He turned away. Snowdrift darted back down the hill. Granite drew back his ears and lowered his tail. The white wolf reached his side. She whined softly, then fastened her teeth carefully on the back of Granite's neck and lifted him off the ground. She carried him up the slope and deposited him gently on the ground before the other wolves. They looked the puppy over carefully, sniffing every inch of his body. Granite locked his jaws together, determined not to whimper. His heart beat fast. Most of the wolves regarded him with silence, but Strider, a white-chested gray male, almost as big as the black wolf, bared his teeth and growled. Granite stared at the ground. If he met the eyes of this gray wolf, he would be in trouble. Then Snowdrift snarled and stepped forward. Ebony moved at her side. Both wolves pulled up the corners of their mouths, showing their teeth. Their ears were erect. Wrinkles creased their foreheads, and the fur across their shoulders stood high. Their tails were stiff. When Strider fell silent, he backed off, his ears drawn back against his head and his tail tucked between his legs. Without another sound, Snowdrift scooped up Granite and trotted up the hill. The puppy dangled beneath her jaws, swaying with each step. He was almost too heavy for the wolf to carry, and his legs bumped on the rocks in the path. As the wolf climbed, Granite watched the rest of the pack run through the brush until they disappeared in the night shadows. Near the top, Snowdrift leaped onto a narrow ledge that made a path around the hill. She carried Granite along this ledge, then jumped over several rocks and darted into an opening just wide enough for her to pass through. She carried him down a tunnel and into a wide chamber, where she dropped him onto the smooth earth floor. The den was cool and dry and smelled of wolf, but the smells were old. No one had slept here for weeks. Snowdrift bathed the little dog with her tongue. She cleaned away all traces of the storm and the wild dash through the woods and gave his sore legs special attention. Under the touch of her tongue, Granite's fear melted. For the first time since he left home, he felt safe. His weary muscles relaxed. Despite his hunger, he was soon fast asleep. When Granite awoke, the black wolf stood over him. In the dim light, the brown eyes seemed darker and larger than they had on the mountain. A small ball of fear grew inside Granite. He cowered before Ebony, who stared at him but made no sound. In an attempt to please the big wolf, Granite stretched up and licked the corners of his mouth, as he had seen the white wolf do. To his surprise, Ebony opened his jaws wide, squeaked, and brought up a great heap of meat. It made a warm, foamy pile on the floor. Granite fell on the food, eating hungrily in great gulps. Ebony watched Granite eat, but there was no warmth in his eyes. He had fed the pup only to humor Snowdrift. When the food was gone, he turned and trotted back out of the tunnel.